Une grande partie du vocabulaire employé dans l'ISO 14001
Much of the vocabulary used in ISO 14001 is derived from the common vocabulary of all management system standards.
ISO 9000
This common vocabulary is defined in ISO 9000-2015. Thus, terms such as interested parties are used in all management system standards. For example, ISO 9001 for quality, ISO 14001 for safety, and mean the same thing. Here are the terms that need to be interpreted. Organization. The organization is the one that implements the environmental management system. It is composed of all the people who have the responsibilities that we will see later through the requirements. Interested parties. Also called stakeholders, these are the other parties who have an influence within the framework of the environmental management system. For example, they can be subtractors needing to coordinate on waste management, local associations, authorities in charge of controls, etc.
des autorités en charge des contrôles.
Legal and other requirements. These are the requirements, in addition to those cited in ISO 14001, with which the organization must comply and chooses to comply. For example, it must comply with the regulations in force, on which it generally depends. The Environmental Code in France, for example, local decrees that may concern the organization, international directives and regulations such as REACH, and directives specific to its products and services if, for example, the organization produces or distributes tires, batteries, etc.
L'organisme produit ou distribue des pneus, des batteries.
Environmental Management System. The notion of management system refers to all the elements that make up the response to the requirements of the standard. For example, environmental policies, objectives, processes, procedures, auditing, and reporting arrangements.
Les dispositions d'audit et de remontée d'informations.
An important point. From now on, we will use the term management system to refer to the environmental management system. Management. When the standard uses the concept of management, it is not just the management function of a site, office, or entity. It is the broader concept that encompasses both the highest level of management and all the people and responsibilities that can lead the site, office, or entity. Objectives, performance, effectiveness. These terms very often interact with each other. What is important to remember is, objectives are results to be achieved, in relation to a policy, for example. Performance is a measurable result, often through indicators, and effectiveness represents the achievement or not of the expected results. For example, an environmental policy may set environmental objectives, performance measures will assess whether or not these objectives are being met, so effectiveness may or may not be concluded. Policy. These are the officially formulated intentions of management. This term is used in ISO 14001 because environmental policy refers to intentions and directions specifically aimed at achieving environmental objectives. It is from this policy that the entire management system is derived. Risk. These are often potential events or combinations of potential events that are likely to occur. Here we are talking about a notion of uncertainty. They can happen like never before. Opportunity. This term doesn't sound like much, but since its appearance with the HLS standard, and more particularly with the transition to the 2015 version of major standards such as ISO 9001 and ISO 14001, it has caused quite a bit of ink to flow. Above all, remember that these are opportunities to improve environmental performance, and in some cases, to reduce risks. Documented information. This is a rather complex term to say, quite simply, that it is written information, processes and procedures. Processes are a set of interrelated activities, and procedures are specific descriptions related to an activity or process. For example, a management system may include an improvement process. I emphasize that this is an example. There are no requirements in any of the standards to specifically identify this process. This process could include activities such as carrying out internal audits, measuring the performance of processes, measuring indicators relating to environmental impacts such as consumption, pollution, and others. More specifically, procedures could describe precisely the practice of internal audits, for example, or the management of corrective actions. Compliance or non-compliance. This refers to the satisfaction of a requirement, whether this requirement relates to a standard or a purely internal provision. Corrective action. This is an action aimed at eliminating the causes of a non-conformity or an adverse event so that they do not recur. This definition is much more important than it sounds. Indeed, when faced with a nonconformity, a problem, even more so when faced with pollution, it is obvious that action is taken as quickly as possible in order to return to a normal situation. However, it must clearly be understood that corrective action comes later, once the situation is under control. Corrective action requires time for analysis in order to understand the cause of what has happened. Then, and only then, to plan a corrective action if necessary. The ISO 14001 standard also includes a few terms that are specific to it. Among these terms are the following. Environment. It was time to talk about it. This is the environment in which the organism is found and on which it can have an influence, positive or negative. Air, water, soil, natural resources, flora, fauna, human beings, and all living things. Environmental aspects. Environmental aspects are the elements of the processes, activities of the organism, products and services that interact with the environment. Environmental impact. These are positive or negative modifications of the organism on the environment. Pollution prevention. This definition obviously encompasses one of the bases of this standard. It refers to the deployment of processes, methods, techniques, and materials or products, services, or energy that make it possible to avoid, reduce, or control the creation, emission, or discharge of any type of pollutant or waste, in order to reduce negative environmental impacts. A final definition for those familiar with the first version of the standard. The term environmental target is now assimilated to environmental objectives. An example, objectives set by the organization in a manner consistent with, guess what? Its environmental policy. So much for the important definitions. Now let's go into the details of the requirements of ISO 14001. I'll see you in the next episode.